Stacey and welcome to the kitchen of my old Kentucky home. Today we're going to feature an over 100-year-old Louisville culinary creation as we show you how to do oysters and champagne Louisville style. For our Louisville rolled oysters, here's what we'll need. A pint and a half of oysters, a cup of cornmeal, a quarter cup of milk, 1 egg, a half a cup of white flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of kosher salt, and at least 2 cups of canola oil or lard. So we're going to start by sifting our first 3 dry ingredients. We've got our all-purpose flour. You can use self-rising too, it's not going to rise. Our baking powder and our salt. This is kosher salt. I'm sure you can also use table salt if that's all that you have. And then we're going to sift this. Now, when we've done this before, we've talked about you can use a hand crank sifter, but if you don't have one, this works just as well. A little colander sieve. You can just kind of shake it through, or you can push it through. And this is just going to get the dry ingredients just a little more fine of a powder than what it was originally. So see how nice and powdery that looks, okay? We're going to push this off to the side, and we've got our cornmeal, and next we're going to mix our wet ingredients. So we're going to take the quarter cup of milk, and I got a local country milk in here. It's whole milk. It's nice and sweet. And then if you don't, you need to save at least 2 tablespoons of the oyster liqueur and add to that. If there wasn't enough, you can also increase the milk to about 1/3 of a cup because we just need it nice and moist. I'm just gonna crack 1 egg into this. I'll whisk these wet ingredients. All right, now for the fun part. We're gonna take our wet ingredients and mix them into our sifted flour mixture. Get that nice and mixed. And this has the egg, the milk, and the oyster liqueur in it. It's nice and wet. And then we're simply going to take 3 oysters at a time and roll them around in this batter. We're gonna then dredge them in the cornmeal mix. And then we're gonna do that again before we put them on our prepared baking sheet. And this is just wax paper on a baking sheet. So the fun part. So I've got these nice juicy oysters. I think these were Chesapeake. You can use Blue Point or whatever you've got on hand. And we're just gonna mix this around, get this nice and coated, and then just in a lump together, that's a culinary term, right? We're gonna take them over to the cornmeal. I'm going to dredge them in this. And then I've seen some cookbooks that say to do this again. So I always think twice, no more is best. So we're going to do that. So 1 more coating of the wet with the flour, 1 more into the cornmeal. And then we're just going to put this little packet, if you will, onto our baking sheet. And we're going to make out a couple of more of these, but you only want to cook 1 or 2 at a time in a prepared skillet. And I've got some canola oil heating. We're going to heat that up to 375, so we're going to take a couple of these over to the stove. Okay, we have our cast iron skillet heated up with about almost 2.5 cups of canola oil. You can also use lard, as I mentioned. And we're getting it to 375. My thermometer broke, so we're not gonna be able to have an exact measure, but one way you can check is to just put a little cornmeal and see if it sizzles up. So I think we're ready for frying. Okay, we're just gonna take our little oyster packets and ever so carefully drop them into the grease. And as I said, you only wanna do 1, maybe 2 at a time because you don't wanna crowd the pan. And we're just gonna let this come to almost a golden brown. You just kind of tell from how that's bubbling up, then I want to crank it up a little higher. Okay, I flipped this first one. I just can kind of tell it's been about 2 minutes, but I could just kind of tell from the crust on the bottom what color that was getting, and so it looked about right to me. I'm going to flip the other. And again, we're just looking for that color underneath to turn the same, this golden brown. We'll give it about another 2 minutes to take them off. So what goes better with oysters than champagne? Let's go watch Jessica make a champagne cocktail with that Kentucky special ingredient, bourbon, while I fry up the rest of these oysters.
So today I'm going to do my own riff on a classic champagne cocktail. Usually these are made with just champagne, a sugar cube and bitters, or champagne, a sugar cube, brandy, and bitters. But today we're going to be using Kentucky bourbon, of course. I'm also going to use vanilla extract, sugar cube, orange peel for garnish, orange bitters, and champagne. So what we're going to do is just take your sugar cube and put it on a spoon over your champagne glass. We can just build this right into the cocktail glass. I'm going to take orange bitters and saturate the sugar cube with the bitters. And then I'm also going to use my eyedropper tool here, which is very handy, to get a little bit of that vanilla extract. And we're just going to do about 3 drops of vanilla extract, not as much as with the bitters. So then you can go ahead and just drop that sugar cube, not an ice cube, right into the bottom of the champagne glass. And we're going to use 1 ounce of bourbon. Okay. And then we're going to top this with our champagne. And then we're gonna just slowly add in our champagne so that it doesn't fizz over the bottle. And what the sugar cube is gonna do is, while you're enjoying the cocktail, you're gonna get a nice release of like the effervescence from the bubbles throughout the whole time as that sugar is dissolving. So there we go, we're all topped off with champagne, and I'm just gonna get a little bit of our orange peel here, just the outside, not the pith part. Peel it off nicely there. See how there's not very much white on the inside there, and we just want to get a little bit of those essential oils squeezed out and rubbed around the rim of the glass. I'm just going to drop it right in there for our bubbling over cocktail.
Well, Jessica, this is such an elegant cocktail, another one of your originals.
Yes.
And remind me, what are you calling it?
Okay, so this is called the Bubbling Over,
Okay.
and I actually had Jordan help me come up with the name for it today. And so I was telling him about the ingredients in the cocktail, and immediately when he thought of sugar cubes, he was thinking about how you give horses a sugar cube as a treat.
Yeah.
So then we thought we'd look into some Derby winners, some past Derby winners for inspiration. And in 1926, Bubbling Over won the Derby, and that's perfect for a champagne drink with a Kentucky twist.
That is so clever.
Isn't that fun?
I love
Leave
that.
it to Jordan.
You guys are awesome that way. Awesome.
Well, this is certainly not a new dish.
No.
I actually grew up eating these too.
Yeah, right?
But my grandma, instead of using cornmeal, she would crush up saltine crackers and use that as the coating on the outside.
In my research for this recipe, I've seen that. In fact, I think they use crackers at Check's, one of my favorite places to get
Right by my
them.
house.
Yeah. I think Kingfish might too. Those are the 2 restaurants I know that still carry these after all these years.
Well, where did the original come from?
So this is a really interesting story. So in my research, something like I've grown up with, but apparently over 100 years ago, and there's like a lot of culinary traditions, there's different theories on it, and the theories were that two restaurateurs come to mind. Philip Mazzoni and his brothers had a tavern on 3rd Street downtown, and Mazzoni's only recently closed, several years ago. It was a restaurant I remembered.
I never made it there.
You never made it there? It's a Queen of Sheba now, the last one of them. But so the story goes that they were an Italian immigrant family, and they made this pastry and did the oysters, and they sold them at their saloon as a way to get people to drink more beer or whiskey. So I thought that was cute.
Yeah,
but there
I
was.
wish they would still do that.
That's right. But there was another guy at the time. His name was Al Kolb, and I had not heard of them before I did a little more digging. He claimed that his mother brought the recipe from New Orleans, which is also a very heavily immigrant Italian area. So who knows? They battled that out for years. But by the late 1800s, early 19th century, this became a very popular snack in Louisville, and it really was invented in the city. And some people might like, well, oysters, we were inbound. It was because, another one of those reasons of the steamboat. It brought them in from the East Coast, so oysters have just always been abundant. So this has been a popular snack for over 100 years.
Yep. The river has brought us oysters and bourbon.
It has, right? So
be thankful for that.
That's right. So cheers to that. And for more recipes like this, continue to follow us on culinarylouisville.com.
And we'll see you next time on Bourbon
and Biscuits.
Cheers. Cheers.
Cheers.